The massive alien vessels appeared on long-range sensors as dark silhouettes against the stars. Thousands of them. They moved in perfect formation, a wall of metal and energy advancing toward Earth with terrible purpose. The command center of the UES Resilience fell silent as the reality of what they were seeing sank in. Admiral Park stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. Unlike her crew, whose faces showed fear or shock, her posture remained relaxed. She had been preparing for this day for years. "Analysis," she ordered calmly. "Over 3,000 warships." "Admiral," replied Officer Yoon, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "Configuration unknown, but energy readings suggest weapons beyond anything in our database. They'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 6 hours." Admiral Park nodded. "Thank you, Officer Yoon." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Their small fleet of 300 ships seemed laughably inadequate against such overwhelming force. "Admiral," said Commander Ba, her second-in-command, in a hushed tone, "should we activate the emergency protocols? Evacuation of key personnel to the underground shelters could begin immediately." Park turned to face him, and to his surprise, her eyes held a hint of amusement. "That won't be necessary, Commander. Not yet." Before Ba could respond, Lieutenant Kim's voice cut through the tension. "They're hailing us, Admiral." Park straightened her jacket and smoothed back a stray strand of hair. On screen, the main view screen flickered, and the image of an alien appeared. The creature had scaled skin in mottled shades of green and gray. Its yellow eyes, with vertical pupils like a cat's, stared out at them with cold intelligence. A ridge of bony protrusions ran from the top of its head down what appeared to be its spine. When it opened its mouth to speak, rows of sharp teeth gleamed under the lights of its ship. "I am High Commander Drac of the Viral Imperium," the alien announced in perfect, if oddly accented, English. "Your primitive sensors have no doubt detected our arrival. We have studied your species for some time. You will surrender immediately or face extinction. You have 1 Earth rotation to comply." The bridge crew tensed, some reaching instinctively for weapons that weren't there. Commander Baz's face hardened, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. But Admiral Park did something no one expected. She smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Commander Drac," she said, her voice calm and welcoming. "I am Admiral Park of the Terran Coalition. On behalf of humanity, I welcome you to our solar system." The alien blinked, its vertical pupils contracting slightly in what might have been surprise. Park continued before it could respond. "We've prepared a diplomatic reception to welcome your delegation aboard our orbital station Unity. Would tomorrow at 1800 hours suit you? We would be honored to discuss any matters of importance to the Viral Imperium." A strange silence fell over both bridges. On the Resilience, the crew stared at their admiral in disbelief. On the alien vessel, subordinate Viral could be seen exchanging confused glances in the background. High Commander Drac's scaled face contorted in what might have been confusion or anger. It was difficult to read the alien's expressions. "You invite us to dinner," Drac finally said, the previous confidence in his voice giving way to uncertainty, "while our warships surround your planet." "Did you not hear me, human? I said surrender or be destroyed." Admiral Park's smile didn't waver. "I heard you perfectly, Commander, and I'm extending an invitation for diplomatic talks. We have prepared suitable accommodations for your species' comfort. Our research suggests your people enjoy protein-rich foods, so our chefs have prepared several options we hope will be satisfactory." A low hiss escaped the alien commander's mouth. "This is not a diplomatic mission. This is conquest. The Viral Imperium has claimed 12 systems before yours. None have survived resistance." "How fascinating," Park replied, as if they were discussing an interesting historical fact rather than a threat of genocide. "I look forward to learning more about your people's accomplishments tomorrow." Traditional formal wear is optional, though many of our delegates enjoy the opportunity to observe various cultural dress customs. The alien commander's yellow eyes narrowed. You mock us? Not at all, Park said, her tone sincere. I'm simply following standard first contact protocols. Surely a species as advanced as yours understands the value of diplomatic exchange before any irreversible actions are taken. Officer Yoon muted the transmission momentarily. Admiral, he whispered urgently, they have enough firepower to glass our planet. What are you doing? Admiral Park gave him a reassuring nod. Following the plan, Officer Yoon. Trust me. She signaled for the transmission to be reopened. The Viral commander was conferring with another alien, this one wearing what appeared to be some kind of ceremonial armor. After a moment, Drac turned back to the screen. You baffle me, human, the commander said. Your species faces annihilation, yet you speak of dinner and dress codes. Are all humans so detached from reality? Of course, Park replied with a slight bow. It would be impolite not to offer hospitality to visitors who have traveled so far. The Terran Coalition values courtesy, even, perhaps especially, in unexpected circumstances. The alien's scaled face remained impassive for several long seconds. Finally, it spoke. Very well. I will bring a delegation to your reception, if only to understand this strange behavior before we conquer your world. Tomorrow at 1800 hours, no more than 6 of your kind may attend. We will bring our own sustenance. We do not trust what you might serve. Park nodded graciously. As you wish, Commander. We look forward to welcoming you aboard Unity Station. Transmission coordinates are being sent now. The screen went dark. For a moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Then Commander Ba approached Admiral Park. With respect, Admiral, have you lost your mind? We can't possibly. Commander, Park interrupted, her voice still calm, but now carrying an edge of steel. I need you to trust me. Contact Dr. Jin and tell him to prepare the Unity Station's special conference room. Lieutenant Kim, please inform the Security Council that first contact has been made, exactly as anticipated. Officer Yoon, transmit Alpha Protocol message to all fleet captains. As her crew hurried to follow orders, Admiral Park turned to look out the viewport at the distant shapes of the alien vessels. To everyone's surprise, a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. They expect fear, she murmured. They've never encountered anything else. That's why we'll win. Commander Ba, who had lingered nearby, asked quietly, How can you be so confident? Park turned to him, her eyes bright with determination. Because, Commander, they came looking for an easy conquest. Instead, they found humans. She glanced back at the stars. And humans have been preparing for this day for a very long time. As the bridge erupted into activity around her, Admiral Park remained still, her posture relaxed despite the alien armada bearing down on Earth. The Viral had come with warships, expecting terror and submission. Instead, they had met a Grin, and they had no idea what that meant. Dr. Lee adjusted his glasses as he watched the Viral representatives enter the orbital station's banquet hall. Their scaled bodies moved with predatory grace, each step calculated and wary. The Unity Station had been decorated with care. Simple but elegant tables arranged in a circle, Earth's most notable artwork displayed on the walls, and large viewports offering a stunning view of both Earth below and the massive alien fleet beyond. They look ready for a fight, not a dinner, whispered Colonel Choi, standing at attention beside Dr. Lee. The 6 Viral delegates towered over most humans in the room. Their reptilian bodies were tense, clawed hands never far from the ceremonial weapons hanging at their sides. Despite Admiral Park's invitation to wear formal attire, they had arrived in what appeared to be battle armor, polished to a shine, but unmistakably designed for combat. Of course they are, Dr. Lee replied quietly. They've conquered 12 systems before ours. Never once have they been invited to dinner first. Colonel Choi scanned the room where only 5 other humans were present. Admiral Park, Defense Minister Ju, Ambassador Han, Security Chief Kang, and Cultural Liaison No. The minimalist attendance had been Admiral Park's idea, matching the virile delegation person for person. They expected us to cower, Colonel Choi whispered. They don't understand why we're calm. Dr. Lee allowed himself a small smile. They will soon enough. Few people knew the truth, that Dr. Lee had spent 15 years of his life developing the quantum shield technology, currently hidden throughout Earth's defense grid. The unassuming physicist had rarely left his laboratory during that time, surviving on coffee and determination as he solved what many believed was an impossible problem. Now that technology was hidden in plain sight, embedded in satellites, defense platforms, and even the structural components of the very station they stood on. High Commander Drax separated from his group and approached them, yellow eyes scanning Dr. Lee's civilian clothes with obvious disdain. You are not military, the alien observed, voice a low rumble. Dr. Lee, head of Earth's Defense Research Division. He replied with a small bow. An honor to meet you, Commander Drax. The alien's eyes narrowed. A scientist. I have studied your world's defensive capabilities extensively. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are few. Yet you smile as if you hold some advantage. Dr. Lee offered the alien a glass of champagne from a passing server's tray. Perhaps we simply enjoy meeting new species. This is a momentous occasion for humanity. Drax ignored the offered drink. 12 worlds said the same before they fell. Some fought. Some begged. All perished or submitted in the end. How fascinating, Dr. Lee said, genuinely interested. What was it like on those worlds? Did any of them surprise you in any way? The question seemed to catch the alien off guard. Its scaled head tilted slightly, as if reassessing the human before it. None surprised us, it finally said. Some had better weapons. Some had more ships. None had the will to use them properly. From across the room, Admiral Park approached, her formal uniform pristine. Commander Drax, I hope you're finding everything satisfactory. I see you've met Dr. Lee, one of our brightest minds. The virile commander turned its attention to the Admiral. This gathering serves no purpose. Your scientist asks about our conquests as if studying an interesting historical event rather than your imminent future. Knowledge has always been valuable to humans, Admiral Park replied smoothly, even, perhaps especially, in challenging times. A low hiss escaped the alien commander. You have 3 days to surrender, Drax stated flatly. After that, we begin systematic destruction of your orbital defenses, followed by your major population centers. Those who survive may serve the Imperium. Admiral Park, overhearing, simply nodded politely. That won't be necessary. The casual dismissal of the threat clearly agitated the alien commander. Its claws flexed involuntarily at its sides. You mistake confidence for foolishness. Admiral, Drax growled. I could order your destruction now. But you won't, Dr. Lee interjected. Because you're curious. Why would a species facing annihilation invite its would-be conquerors to dinner? What do we know that you don't? Before the commander could respond, Admiral Park gestured toward the center of the room. I believe dinner is ready to be served. Commander, we've prepared a special table for your delegation, with environmental settings matched to your homeworld's specifications. The alien's gaze lingered on Dr. Lee for a moment longer before it rejoined its delegation. As they moved toward their table, Colonel Choi leaned closer to Dr. Lee. Is it true what they say? That the shields can withstand anything they throw at us? Dr. Lee watched the aliens take their seats, noting how they positioned themselves for quick access to the exits. Theoretically, yes, he replied. The quantum displacement field doesn't just block energy. It redirects it to a parallel state of existence. The more energy they use against us, the stronger our shields become. But theory and practice are different things. And you've never tested it against actual virile weapons, Colonel Choi realized. Correct. But we've tested it against everything we could create or imagine, including simulations based on long-range scans of their technology. Dr. Lee adjusted his glasses again. It should work. Across the room, one of the virile delegates was scanning the station with a handheld device, while another appeared to be sampling the air. They were looking for weapons, defenses, anything that would explain humanity's baffling confidence. They wouldn't find anything. The quantum technology was undetectable by conventional means, another feature Dr. Lee had spent years perfecting. It existed in a state of quantum uncertainty, neither fully present nor absent until needed. It's strange, Dr. Lee mused as they took their seats. They came all this way expecting us to either fight and die or surrender immediately. Instead, we're having dinner and making conversation. Is that why we're really here? Colonel Choi asked. To confuse them? Dr. Lee smiled slightly. Confusion is a tactical advantage, Colonel. While they're trying to understand us, we're learning everything about them. As the meal progressed, Admiral Park skillfully directed the conversation through diplomatic pleasantries, careful to reveal nothing of strategic importance while encouraging the Viral to speak of their empire, their conquests, their traditions. Dr. Lee remained mostly silent, carefully observing their guests' technology, physiology, and behavior. Each detail confirmed what their long-range intelligence had suggested. The Viral were formidable but predictable. They understood strength but not subtlety. They recognized technology but not innovation. Near the end of the meal, Commander Drack stood abruptly, causing a momentary tension in the room. This charade has continued long enough, the alien announced. We will return to our vessel. Prepare your surrender terms or prepare for extinction. Admiral Park rose calmly. Thank you for joining us, Commander. We look forward to further discussions. There will be no further discussions, Drack hissed. You have 3 days. As the Viral delegation departed, Dr. Lee approached Admiral Park. They're going to test us, he said quietly. Admiral Park nodded. Of course they are. Probably within the next 12 hours. Is everything ready? Yes, Admiral. All systems are green. The moment they fire on any Earth target, the shields will activate. She smiled, the same confident smile she had shown the alien commander. Then we wait, and when they discover their weapons can't harm us, they'll either retreat or escalate. Dr. Lee finished. Most likely escalate, and we'll be ready either way. Admiral Park looked out the viewport at the alien fleet. They came expecting an easy conquest, Dr. Lee. Instead, they found humanity, stubborn, innovative, and far more dangerous than we appear. As the station's lights dimmed to night cycle, Dr. Lee remained at the viewport, watching the distant shapes of the Viral warships. 15 years of his life had led to this moment. Tomorrow would prove whether his work would save humanity or doom it. Either way, the Viral were about to learn why humans met their warships with a grin. Lieutenant Han stood on the bridge of the TS Dauntless, her small patrol vessel hovering at the edge of Mars orbit. Despite being only 32 years old, she had been given command of the ship for this critical mission. The red planet loomed large in the viewport, the dome of New Armstrong Colony visible on its surface as a tiny gleaming half-sphere. Lieutenant, Viral warships detected leaving Earth orbit, reported Ensign Moon, his eyes fixed on the sensor display. 15 vessels, heavy cruiser class, course plotted directly for Mars. Han nodded, her expression calm though her heart raced, just as Admiral Park predicted. They're testing us. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. The Dauntless was technically a research vessel retrofitted with defensive capabilities. It was barely 1/10 the size of a Viral cruiser. Alongside it floated just 5 other human ships of similar size, the extent of Earth's Mars defense fleet. They're broadcasting a message on all frequencies, said communications officer back. Should I put it through? Yes, Han replied, straightening her uniform jacket. The main screen flickered to life, showing the scaled face of a Viral commander. Not Drack, but one of his subordinates. Humans of Mars Colony, the alien announced. This is Strike Commander Krell of the Viral Imperium. Your leadership has refused our generous offer of surrender. As a demonstration of our power, this colony will be removed. Evacuate if you wish. You have 2 hours. The message ended abruptly. Han could see the fear on her crew's faces. "Lieutenant," whispered Navigator CO, "there are 15,000 civilians down there." Han's hands tightened on the command rail. "I know. Contact the other ships. Formation Delta. And send word to New Armstrong that no evacuation will be necessary." Officer Back looked up in shock. "No evacuation." "But, Lieutenant—" "Trust me, officer," Han interrupted with a small smile. "And trust Dr. Lee." The 6 small human vessels moved into position, forming a barrier between the oncoming Viral fleet and Mars. On the sensors, Han could see the massive alien ships approaching, each one a city-sized weapon of war, bristling with gun ports and missile bays. "They're within firing range," reported Ensign Moon, his voice remarkably steady. "Energy signatures indicate weapons powering up." Han opened a channel to the other 5 ships. "This is Lieutenant Han. All vessels, prepare for first contact protocol. Remember your training." She paused, then added, "All ships, activate quantum shields." Throughout the small fleet, officers pressed sequence codes into their consoles. On the Dauntless, Han herself entered the final authorization, then watched as her screens displayed the confirmation. "QUANTUVUM displacement field active." To the naked eye, nothing appeared to change. But at the quantum level, the space around each human vessel shifted into a state that Dr. Lee had once described as half a step sideways from reality. "Viral ships firing," called Ensign Moon. Han didn't flinch as the first blasts of energy, bright green beams of concentrated plasma, shot toward her vessel. The bridge crew tensed, some closing their eyes involuntarily. The beams struck the Dauntless and simply disappeared like water poured into sand. No impact, no damage, no effect whatsoever. A stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken only by Officer Back's whispered, "It worked. It actually worked." The second and third blasts followed in quick succession, aimed at different human ships. Each disappeared just as completely, absorbed by the invisible barrier Dr. Lee had created. "Status report," Han ordered, her voice steady. "Shields at 100%, Lieutenant," replied Engineering Officer Yuk with poorly concealed excitement. "Energy absorption complete. The quantum field is actually strengthening with each hit, just like Dr. Lee said it would." On the screen, Han could see the Viral ships launching a barrage of missiles. These 2 vanished upon reaching the quantum field, their matter and energy dispersed into parallel space. "They're increasing power," Ensign Moon reported. "Energy readings off the scale. They're bringing their main cannons online." Han nodded. "Right on schedule. Prepare the pulse transmitter." As the massive Viral cruisers aligned their main weapons, planet-killer cannons capable of rendering Mars uninhabitable with a single shot. Han's fingers danced across her console, activating a sequence that connected all 6 human vessels into a single network. "Pulse transmitter charging," she announced. "All ships, synchronize on my mark." The energy buildup from the Viral fleet was now visible even to the naked eye, their weapons glowing with deadly green light. Whatever doubts the bridge crew might have had were being erased by the moment. The shields were holding perfectly. "Mark," Han called. From each human vessel, an invisible pulse radiated outward, not energy or matter, but a quantum wave that interfered with the fundamental forces binding atoms together. The pulse passed through the quantum shields unaffected but struck the Viral ships with full force. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the lights on the alien vessels flickered and died. Their weapons powered down. Their engines fell silent. Seconds later, the approaching Viral ships went dark, drifting powerless in space. "Direct hit on all targets," reported Officer Yuk. "Quantum disruption successful. Their ships are completely disabled, life support, and minimal gravity only, just as planned." Han allowed herself a moment to breathe. The pulse had been designed by Dr. Lee to temporarily disrupt artificial power generation without harming organic life. The Viral were uninjured but helpless. She opened a channel to the disabled fleet. This is Lieutenant Han of the Terran Coalition Mars Defense Fleet to Veral vessels. Your weapons cannot harm us, and we've temporarily disabled your ships. She paused, letting the reality of their situation sink in for the aliens. Be advised that we could have destroyed you completely. The same technology that neutralized your weapons could have been calibrated to disrupt the atomic bonds in your hull materials. Instead, we've chosen to disable your vessels temporarily. Your core systems will reset and regain function in approximately 6 hours. Another pause. We are extending another invitation to talk, not as conquerors and conquered, but as spacefaring species with the potential for mutual benefit. Admiral Park awaits your response once your communications are restored. In the silence that followed, Han allowed herself a small smile. She imagined the confusion and disbelief aboard those massive warships. The Veral had never encountered a species that could neutralize their weapons so completely, let alone one that would show mercy afterward. "Lieutenant," said Officer Back quietly, "we're receiving transmissions from New Armstrong Colony. They're asking if the danger has passed." Han looked out at the disabled Veral fleet, then down at the red planet below. "Tell them yes," she replied. "And tell them they can come outside if they want to see something interesting." 15 Veral warships drifting dead in space. As her crew relayed the message, Han received a private communication from Earth. Admiral Park's face appeared on her personal screen. "Well done, Lieutenant," the Admiral said, her expression composed but her eyes bright with approval. "The demonstration was perfect." "Thank you, Admiral," Han replied. "Do you think they'll accept the invitation this time?" Admiral Park's mouth curved into the same confident smile she'd shown Commander Drac. "They don't have much choice, but more importantly, they're curious now. We've shown them something they've never seen before, a species that could defeat them but chooses conversation instead." Han nodded. "What's our next move?" "Maintain position and wait. When their ships come back online, escort Commander Krull to Earth if he accepts our invitation. If not..." The Admiral shrugged. "We demonstrate again, with more of their fleet." As the communication ended, Han looked out at the drifting alien vessels, now harmless shadows against the stars. For 15 years, humanity had prepared for this moment, developing in secret while appearing vulnerable to outside observers. "Lieutenant," Ensign Moon asked hesitantly, "why didn't we just use this technology to destroy them? Why take the risk?" Han turned to face her young officer. "Because, Ensign, this isn't about winning a battle. It's about winning something much more important." "Peace," suggested Navigator CO. Han smiled and shook her head. "Allies, because what's coming next is something neither humans nor Veral can face alone." She turned back to the viewport, watching as the first lights began to flicker back on aboard the alien vessels, faster than expected. The Veral were adapting, learning. Good. They would need that resilience for what lay ahead. "Send a message to Admiral Park," Han ordered. "Tell her the Veral are waking up sooner than anticipated, and they appear to be in a mood to talk." Commander Drac entered the private conference room aboard the Unity station with none of the arrogance he had shown 3 days earlier. His scaled shoulders were tense, his movements careful. He was alone, a significant change from the 6-member delegation of the first meeting. Admiral Park stood as he entered, offering a respectful nod rather than a smile this time. The room was small and simple, with just a round table and 2 chairs. A holographic projector sat in the center of the table, currently inactive. "Thank you for coming, Commander," Park said. Drac stood stiffly by the door for a moment, studying her. His yellow eyes blinked slowly, vertically, before he moved forward to take the seat opposite hers. "Your Lieutenant Han made it clear that refusing was not a practical option," he said, his voice rumbling low. "You always had a choice," Park replied. "You still do." The alien commander's clawed hand tapped against the table's surface. "You could have eliminated our forward fleet," Drac said, facing Admiral Park across the private conference room. "Your quantum technology, It could have been weaponized to destroy our ships rather than merely disable them. Why didn't you? Park held his gaze steadily. Would you have preferred that outcome, Commander? A sound like a quiet hiss escaped the alien. No, but it confuses me. The Veral way is clear. Show strength. Eliminate threats. Conquer or destroy. Your way. He made a gesture with his clawed hand. Your way makes no sense. You had victory within your grasp and chose not to take it. There are different kinds of victory, Park said. She reached forward and activated the holographic projector. And different kinds of threats. The air above the table filled with light as a three-dimensional star map appeared. It showed a portion of the galaxy, with Earth and the Veral home system marked in blue. Drac leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued despite himself. Park touched a control, and the image zoomed out, revealing the edge of the galaxy. There, moving slowly but steadily inward, were dark, geometric shapes, perfect cubes and pyramids of enormous size, each one larger than a planet. We call them the Void, Park said quietly. They'd been consuming stellar systems at the rim of the galaxy. We've been monitoring them for decades. They're the reason we developed our defensive technology. Drac's yellow eyes widened. His scaled body went completely still, a predator's instinctive response to unexpected danger. What are they? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Park adjusted the hologram, zooming in on one of the cube-shaped objects. Surface details became visible, not metal or rock, but something that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. We don't know, she admitted. Our long-range probes detected them 25 years ago. At first, we thought they were natural phenomena, perhaps some kind of dark matter concentration. Then we realized they were moving, deliberately. The hologram shifted to show a star system at the galaxy's edge. As they watched, one of the dark cubes approached the system's sun. The star's light began to dim, then flicker, before being completely extinguished. The planets, suddenly without their anchor, drifted into darkness. They consume energy, Park continued. All energy from all sources. Stars, radiation, even artificial power systems. They leave nothing but cold, dead space behind them. Drac's claws extended involuntarily, scratching the table's surface. And you think they're coming here? We know they are, Park said softly. Based on their current trajectory and speed, they'll reach the outer colonies of both our civilizations within 5 years. Earth and the Veral homeworld within 10. The alien commander stood abruptly, pacing the small room. His tail lashed behind him, a sign of agitation. If what you show me is true, he said, why did you not share this information immediately? Why this charade of diplomacy when extinction threatens us both? Park remained seated, her posture calm. Would you have believed us, Commander? If we had greeted your warships with tales of mysterious space entities, would you have listened? Or would you have seen it as a transparent attempt to avoid conquest? Drac stopped pacing. His eyes narrowed as he considered her words. No, he admitted finally. I would not have believed you. We needed to demonstrate our technological capability first, Park explained, to show you that we could have fought you. And won, if that had been our intention. Only then would you take this threat seriously. The hologram changed again, showing the path of the void entities through the galaxy. Their course would take them through both human and Veral space, consuming everything in their path. The quantum displacement technology that powers our shields, Park continued, was developed specifically to counter the void. Conventional weapons and defenses are useless against them, but our tests suggest the quantum field might repel them, or at least redirect their path. Drac returned to his seat, his movements slow and deliberate. And this is why you spared our fleet. You need us. We need each other, Park corrected gently. Even with our quantum technology, humanity alone cannot build enough shield generators to protect all our worlds. The Veral Imperium has greater industrial capacity, more ships, more resources. Together, we might have a chance. The alien commander stared at the holographic display, watching as simulated void entities consumed star after star in their relentless advance. "The question," Park said, "is whether the Viral and humans face them separately or together." Drac was silent for a long time. His species had built an empire on conquest, not cooperation. For generations, the Viral had known only victory, only domination. The concept of alliance was foreign, almost incomprehensible. "If what you show me is real," he said finally, "then the Imperium faces its greatest threat. Greater than any resistance we have encountered in 12 conquered systems." "It's real," Park assured him. "We can provide all our data for your scientists to verify. We have nothing to gain by fabricating this." The alien commander stood silent for a long moment before speaking. "My Emperor must see this." Park nodded. "Of course. We can arrange secure transmission of all our findings to your homeworld immediately." "No," Drac said firmly. "I must present this personally. The implications are too significant for distance communication." He turned to face her fully, drawing himself up to his full height. "I will return to the Imperium. If our scientists confirm your findings, I will advocate for—" He seemed to struggle with the word. "Cooperation." "Thank you, Commander," Park said, rising to her feet. "How many of your vessels will return with you?" "All of them," Drac replied. "If this void is real, every ship will be needed for the defense of our core worlds." Admiral Park extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Drac extended his clawed hand to meet hers. "I never imagined," the alien commander said quietly, "that I would leave this system without either conquering it or destroying it." "And I never imagined," Park replied, "that the arrival of a conquest fleet would be the beginning of our salvation rather than our end." As Drac turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Your smile when we first met," he said. "You knew even then that this moment would come." Admiral Park's lips curved upward slightly. "We hoped, Commander. Sometimes hope is the most powerful weapon of all." After the alien had departed, Dr. Lee entered the conference room from a side door, where he had been monitoring the meeting. "Do you think they'll return?" he asked quietly. Admiral Park looked at the holograms still hovering over the table, the dark shapes of the void entities crawling inexorably toward their corner of the galaxy. "They'll return," she said with certainty, "because now they know what we've known for 25 years. That we need each other to survive," Dr. Lee finished. Park nodded, her expression solemn but determined. "The void is coming, and when it arrives, it will find not two civilizations divided, but a united front, human innovation and virile strength, standing together against the dark." The UES Resilience gleamed under the lights of the ceremonial hall. Once a military vessel, today it served as the site of the most important diplomatic event in human history. The great observation deck had been transformed for the occasion, with the vast window offering a view of Earth below and Jupiter in the distance, where the combined fleet was gathering. Admiral Park stood near the center of the room, her dress uniform adorned with the single gold star that had become the symbol of Earth's defense forces. Beside her, Dr. Lee adjusted his formal attire uncomfortably. The scientist was more at home in his laboratory than at diplomatic functions. Lieutenant Han maintained her position near the viewport, her posture perfect as she surveyed the gathered crowd. 300 people filled the observation deck, half human, half feral. Just weeks ago, they had been enemies. Today, they were witnesses to a new beginning. "They're ready," whispered Colonel Choi, approaching Admiral Park. "The Emperor's transmission is stable." Park nodded. "Then let's begin." The lights dimmed slightly, and a massive holographic projection appeared at the front of the hall. The scaled face of Emperor Vor, ruler of the Viral Imperium, materialized before them. Even as a projection, his presence was imposing. Ancient scales, eyes like burning coals, and the elaborate crest that marked his royal bloodline. "People of Earth and citizens of the Imperium," the Emperor's voice rumbled through the hall. Today marks the end of conflict and the beginning of necessity. A murmur passed through the crowd. The Emperor had been initially skeptical of the void threat, but Drax's evidence, combined with the verification of virile scientists, had convinced him of its reality. From the side entrance, Ambassador Drax entered. No longer dressed in battle armor, he wore the formal robes of a virile diplomat, though his ceremonial sword still hung at his side, a reminder of the warrior culture that had built an empire across the stars. Ambassador Drax will speak for the Imperium in my absence, the Emperor continued. His authority is absolute. The treaty he signs will be honored by all virile, until the stars themselves grow cold. The hologram flickered and disappeared. All eyes turned to Drax as he approached Admiral Park at the center of the room. A month ago, I would have deemed this moment impossible, Drax said, his voice carrying throughout the hall. Admiral Park inclined her head slightly. The universe has a way of changing our perspectives, Ambassador. A Terran diplomat stepped forward carrying an ancient wooden box. Inside rested two identical tablets, one for humans, one for virile. These were not primitive paper documents but advanced quantum-lock data matrices. Once activated, their contents could never be altered or erased. The treaty signing took place with deliberate ceremony. Dr. Lee and Lieutenant Han stood at attention as Admiral Park, and now Ambassador Drax pressed their thumbs to the documents. Human DNA and virile blood cells were scanned and recorded, binding both species to the agreement. A month ago, we were prepared to conquer your world, Drax admitted, speaking so only those nearest could hear. Now we stand as allies. The universe has a way of providing perspective, Park replied with a small smile. The shipyards on Jupiter are already adapting our quantum technology to your vessels. The crowd erupted in applause, a human custom that the virile had quickly adopted, finding the percussive nature of it appealing to their sensibilities. As the formal part of the ceremony concluded, the gathering broke into smaller groups. Humans and virile mingled cautiously, but with increasing comfort. Scientists from both species were particularly eager to share knowledge, while military personnel compared tactics and technologies. Dr. Lee found himself surrounded by virile scientists, all eager to understand the quantum displacement field that had neutralized their weapons. The principle is surprisingly simple, he explained, sketching diagrams in the air with his finger, which a nearby holoprojector converted into three-dimensional models. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be redirected into parallel quantum states. The virile scientists hissed in appreciation, their species equivalent of astonishment. And this is why you developed no offensive weapons of note, said one scaled scientist. You put all resources into this shield technology. Exactly, Dr. Lee confirmed. We knew conventional weapons would be useless against the void. Our only hope was to create something that could repel their energy-draining capabilities. Across the room, Lieutenant Han found herself in conversation with several virile ship commanders. Despite the language barrier, overcome by translator devices, they shared the universal language of those who commanded vessels among the stars. Your tactic at Mars, said one virile captain, was brilliant. Small vessels, perfect positioning. You knew exactly where we would attack. We've been studying your military strategies for years, Han admitted. Your conquest patterns are consistent, always a demonstration strike against a vulnerable colony before the main assault. The virile captain made a gesture that the translator interpreted as respectful acknowledgement. And now we will fight together against this void. Your shields, our weapons. A formidable combination, Han agreed. Near the viewport, Admiral Park and Ambassador Drax stood side by side, watching as Jupiter grew larger in the distance. The Resilience was moving toward the massive shipyards that orbited the gas giant, where the real work of their alliance had already begun. Outside the viewport, human engineers worked alongside virile technicians, retrofitting the alien warships with Earth's defense systems. The first prototype, a virile dreadnought equipped with quantum displacement generators, hung in space nearby, its modified hull gleaming under Jupiter's reflected light. Will it be enough? Drac asked quietly, his eyes fixed on the distant shipyards. Even with both our civilizations united, the void is unlike anything either of us has faced. Admiral Park considered her answer carefully. I don't know, she admitted. But we have a chance now. Before, separated, we had none. Drac turned to look at her. In all 12 systems the Imperium conquered, never once did we encounter a species that smiled in the face of our warships. It was disconcerting. Park's lips curved upward. Sometimes a smile is the most powerful response to a threat. It says, I know something you don't. And you did, Drac acknowledged. You knew about the void, and you knew your quantum technology could neutralize our weapons. We also knew that neither of us could face what's coming alone, Park added. Across the observation deck, Dr. Lee approached Lieutenant Han, who still stood watching the combined fleet through the viewport. Quite a sight, isn't it? He said, joining her at the window. Viral warships being fitted with human technology. If someone had told me this would happen a month ago, I would have thought they were insane, Han replied. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as shuttles moved between the massive vessels, carrying engineers and equipment. They came with warships, Dr. Lee whispered to Lieutenant Han, a note of wonder in his voice. And we met them with a grin, she finished, watching the former enemies working side by side against a greater threat, each wearing the determined expression that had become the symbol of their unlikely alliance. As the observation deck slowly emptied, Admiral Park remained at the viewport, her reflection ghostly against the stars beyond. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. The treaty was signed, the alliance formed, but the real challenge still lay ahead. Behind her, the doors slid open and closed. She didn't need to turn to know who had entered. The quantum retrofit of the first 50 viral ships will be complete within the week, Dr. Lee reported, coming to stand beside her. The remaining fleet should be ready within 2 months. And the colonization ships? Park asked. Preparation continues on schedule. If the defense line fails, they'll be ready to evacuate as many as possible to the pocket dimension. Park nodded, her eyes still fixed on the activity outside. A last resort. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Lee said quietly. They stood together in silence, watching as human and viral worked side by side on the hull of a massive warship. Despite their physical differences, one species mammalian, the other reptilian, there was a symmetry to their movements, a shared purpose that transcended biology. We should get some rest, Park said finally. Tomorrow the real work begins. As they turned to leave, a notification chimed on Park's communication device. The holographic display showed a priority message from the long-range sensor network at the edge of human space. Park's expression remained composed as she read it, but her eyes betrayed her concern. What is it? Lee asked. The void entities have changed course, she said evenly. They're moving faster than our projections indicated. Estimated arrival time has been revised. How long do we have? Admiral Park closed the holographic display and straightened her uniform. 3 years, not 5. She took a deep breath. We need to accelerate everything. Lee nodded, already calculating new timetables in his head. I'll notify the science teams immediately. As they walked toward the exit, Park paused for one last look at the combined fleet. Against the blackness of space, the ships, human and viral working together, seemed small and fragile. Yet they represented something powerful. 2 species that had overcome their differences in the face of a greater threat. We'll be ready, she said with quiet determination. We have to be. Outside the viewport, the work continued unabated. The future of 2 civilizations depended on it, and somewhere at the edge of the galaxy, the void entities continued their inexorable advance, unaware that their next meal had developed teeth. They came with warships. We met them with a grin, and together we would face the darkness.